Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today I wanted to talk about the future of Rush Duel Links, what we can kind of expect, where I hope things are going, and a little bit about how some people are a little bit disappointed in the initial launch of Seven's World and Rush Duels within Duel Links. So Rush Duels had a fantastic first week in Duel Links, attracting new and old players alike, especially being the premier way to play Rush Duels in the West. Before this, the only real ways we've had to play is on unofficial simulators or in the Dawn of the Battle Royale video game, which again, very limited in the card pool there, and not the greatest play experience in general. You can really tell that it was made for the Switch, and because of that it feels a little bit lackluster to actually jam. Viewership and tournament participant numbers have fallen off since that first week, and it's not too surprising since the card pool is very limited, even compared to the physical release. The first two starter decks released physically were both fantastic and problematic at the same time. The main boss monsters of each of these starter decks were Seven's Red Magician and Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius. These cards are powerful enough that they have always been relevant, to the point where they're even still played to this day. Now, people could argue that only really played because of the support that they've gotten more recently, but those two cards still on their own are fine. Being able to punch your opponent directly for 2500 has always been really good. Being able to boost your attack up to 3900 is also always going to be really good, which means both of these cards are still good to this day, which is something you don't usually see. For example, Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon were almost never seeing any kind of tournament play without their direct support making them usable, whereas Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius, Seven's Red Magician, good enough cards on their own that they have seen a decent amount of play. So it's good to see Rush take things in this direction and be like, okay, we want to make sure that the boss monsters of at least the four main characters are decent enough that they will have a long life ahead of them and not just get power crept after a couple of sets. So again, that's a good thing. The bad part of that though is that means that other boss monsters have to be at least as strong or fall by the wayside. So what we see is a lot of the initial boss monsters that come into the game being quite underwhelming when compared to Seven's Geass and Dragius, and to a lesser extent Prima Gitana and Yami Ruler. We've already kind of started to see this with things like Dean Keto. A 2500 attack monster is fine, but its effect is a little bit weak when compared to the others, as well as Samagellon from this set, which has just never seen any play whatsoever. It'd be nice to see it get a skill or something. The other cards in the decks that made them very, very powerful were the spell and trap cards. We got the spell trap destruction cards for both spellcasters and dragons, which was very, very good. As long as there is something worth destroying, so as there's back row worth popping, it is worth running these cards. And there was definitely back row worth popping. Dragons got counterattack, which could destroy a monster, as well as a way to cheat out dragons from their hand. Spellcasters got Curtain of Sparks, which is a 500 attack combat trick, which is pretty good, and Dark Revelation, which, let's be honest, is probably better that it's not in the game, but at least its existence added an extra level of thought and an extra layer of depth to the game, which we just currently don't have. The cards were too strong, especially when compared to the types outside of dragons and spellcasters released in the main sets. This is why things like Beast Gear struggled to really get going. This is why things like Aqua never really saw play in the early game, because they just couldn't really compete with dragons and spellcasters, and this continued pretty much up until we saw the release of Light Machines, which then was an extra deck that could really hold its own against the Dragoncaster menace. Because of this, Dragoncasters were a dominant meta threat for months and months, primarily due to the power of Dragius, the backup boss monster in Seven's Red Magician, and the strongest trap card in the game, Dark Revelation. Without Dark Revelation, many predicted spellcasters would be a lot weaker, and that dragons would reign supreme within Duel Links, since Dragius is the strongest card in a vacuum currently in the game. The skill 7 Axel Road has managed to keep spellcasters relevant even without their trap card, and we've still seen Dragoncasters be a strong meta threat. I think the idea from Konami was that everyone would play 3 copies of Phantom Bind, as it was kind of the best trap card available, and 3 Hammer Crushers to try and stop your opponent's Phantom Binds, in which case we'd have 3 spells, 3 traps, and then the rest be monsters. But what we've instead seen is Phantom Bind being seldom used and Hammer Crush only being played with its skill to basically pretend that you have a 29 card deck. Because of this, the meta we have is extremely basic. It feels like Unga Bunga without much thought being put into deck building or play. But is that inherently a bad thing? When Duel Links first released, we had Axe Raider as an ultra rare, the meta was similarly simple and somewhat enjoyable. It acted as a good introduction to skills and what Duel Links was, how to play the game, and kind of get to grasp with all of the systems therein. The meta for Rush has also managed to have a little bit of depth to it. Nothing crazy, but enough that just summon Dragius and attack isn't just an auto win against every deck, but it is still very strong. The triangle meta of SAR casters, Yami Ruler warriors, and Dragon casters has created an interesting dynamic. Dragon casters being the easiest deck to play of the bunch, makes sense we'd see more of that deck than anything else, especially on ladder, while casters and warriors are a bit more complex to play as well as play against, requiring you to put a little bit more thought into it. We have already started to see a small drop off in warrior decks at tournaments, which is both because the deck isn't as easy to pilot, as well as not opening Yami Ruler and going first can hurt the deck's performance quite a bit. It also doesn't help that a lot of the decks that are seeing kind of a rise in meta relevance are the decks that hard counter Yami Ruler. So we're already seeing things like Seven's Road Witch, which counters Yami Ruler, being played a lot more in Dragon casters to cheat out the Seven's Road Magician, and the Dragonic Resonance Dragons, which hard counter Yami Ruler. You can either summon Gravity Press Dragon and just completely attack over it, or you can use Dragonic Pressure to just wipe it off the board and just play under it just fine. The other big deck that counters it is also the pure spellcasters, the SAR, because again, you have access to the Seven's Road Witch, Seven's Road Magician combo, as well as being able to use your skill on Splat, pushing it up to a level 6 monster with 2600 attack. So again, a very, very easy way to play under Yami Ruler. Going forward, I'd love to see spells and traps actually become relevant. Cards like Curtain of Sparks for spellcasters, Vengeful Dragon's counterattack for dragons, Ruler's Deadly Duel for warriors, and many, many more. Including support for new types that might be coming out, such as Fiends with Royal Rebels and Beast Warriors with Beast Gear. Two fan favourite decks, two that I personally am also very, very much looking forward to play. Skills have already proved that they can shake up the meta, allowing spellcasters to be extremely strong even without their best card. Yami Ruler warriors are able to use Dark Celerity to have outs to problematic cards, and Resonance giving the weaker Earth Dragon cards a home in their own deck, rather than just acting as support for Dragius. As we get more cards, characters, and skills, I expect Rush Duel Links to grow into a more diverse and interesting meta. We also have more mechanics not introduced yet, including maximums, fusions, and equip spells. We basically don't have any field spells yet either, since Forest is seeing literally zero play because there's just nothing worth playing it with. Even if you're finding yourself getting a bit bored of the current iteration of the game, if you think the game is too simple and Rush has no depth whatsoever, come back when more cards are released. Come back when a new character comes out with a series of cards that interest you. Come back when the game has had a bit more time to cook. Because, like when Duel Links first released back in 2016, the game is nowhere near its final form. So thanks for watching the video. We hope to see you in the next one. And also, hope you stop by the stream over at twitch.tv/Tomatosaurs. We've been streaming every Tuesday and Thursday and having a great time jamming some Duel Links. Hope to see you there.